All right, if you have your Bibles, let's turn to Numbers chapter 13. And no doubt we're all very familiar with where we're going to be going in this lesson today. And I changed it up a little bit from the book. We're going where the book has us just finishing chapter 13. I do want to pick up the first part of chapter 14 this week, because next week we are going to deal more with chapter 14, but I do want to look at the first 4 verses of chapter 14 as we discuss this section this morning. As we begin, the problem I suggest that has plagued God's people throughout the centuries is a tendency to walk by sight rather than by faith. Now, the question I have for you this morning is this: what does it mean to walk by sight rather than by faith?
We cannot direct our own steps in many situations.
That's right.
And so we need help.
We do.
We need some source of God, some source we go to.
Yes, and God is the source, as you just quoted from, Brother Carl, Jeremiah 10:23. But sadly, as we've observed, many people think they can direct their own steps, and so they walk by sight rather than by faith. And it comes down to a failure to trust God, does it not? Why do we at times fail to trust God? What are some causes that will lead us to not put our full trust in God? Lack of study. Pride. And I think that's one reason what we're going to see with Israel again this morning. Can you think of anything else?
We like to be able to touch things to prove it, and that's right back to faith. So it's a matter of trust.
Yeah. We could add doubt. We might doubt. What about fear? Can fear cause us to not trust God?
We're supposed to fear Him.
Well, we fear God. But there is that negative fear. There is that fear which keeps us from doing that which is right.
We study.
Explain that, please. How can fear
Be negative?
Fear becomes motive? Is that what you're saying?
No, fear can keep us from doing that which we know we ought to do. Revelation 21 verse 8 tells us that among those who will be lost are the fearful.
So maybe there's like 2 kinds of fear.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. And there's the godly fear, and then there's that negative fear which paralyzes. And it's this negative fear that we're going to see. I think you'll better understand, Sister Nana, as we look at Numbers chapter 13, and we look at the example of Israel here.
There's a physical fear, and there's a kind of fear we have when we do trust God. About then you turn to Him more in one kind of fear
Yeah.
than you do in another. That's why I say there's 2 kinds of
Yeah, there's one where you turn to God, and there's the one that leads you away from God. And we're going to see the one today that leads one away from God, as Israel's going to show us. Again, here in Numbers 13, they're on the verge of entering the Promised Land. And at the outset, we're going to see some instruction given. And they're told 12 spies are commissioned and to go up and spy out the land. And so, with this in mind, let's first of all look at verses 17 through 25. And let's look at what they viewed. And we'll see that they viewed the land of Canaan. And if someone would, let's begin this morning by looking at verses 17 through 20 as we develop the problem of walking by sight rather than by faith, and especially relating it to the negative fear that we're trying to better understand. Who wants to read verses 17 through 20 for us?
Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said unto them, Get you up this way southward and go up into the mountain, and see the land what it is, and the people that dwell therein, whether they be strong or weak, few or many. And what whether it be fat or lean, whether there be wood therein or not, and be ye of good courage, and bring of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the time of the first ripe grapes.
All right, thank you, Sister Gail. So here we have their commission. Now, when you look back at verses 1 through 3, we have the specific instruction for them to be sent out. One spy from every single tribe. So there's 12 tribes, so you would have 12 spies, one man from each tribe. But notice the authority they were sent out by. Moses sent them. So by whose authority did these spies go by?
Verse 1 says the Lord spoke to Moses.
Indeed. And Moses was divinely commissioned by God. So can we not say that they were following divine authority or the authority of God here in doing as they were sent? And I think it's also important to note here in these 3 verses, they were specifically told what to do, were they not? They were specifically told where to go. Latter portion of verse 17. They were told what to do. Verses 18 and following, to see the land, what it is. What they were to possess. Latter portion of verse 20. Now, what was it they were to possess? What attitude? Let's stop right here for just a moment and let's look at this attitude that they needed, that they were encouraged to possess. Yeah, courage. What is so important about courage? Let's consider this question for a moment.
Well, you probably do not realize what you're getting into for one reason.
Mhm.
You're doing something extraordinary, and I can only relate to that. In the war, we sent a constant mission ahead of our fight to evaluate what we need to do to make it.
So they needed to be courageous men.
Huh?
They needed to be very courageous to be able to go ahead and, scout out what was going on.
Right.
And so I think that's a good illustration of this here. They needed the courage because they were going into a land they had never been, correct? They'd never even seen it. And so they needed courage. But yet with God on their side, they could be courageous. So the question then is raised, as Christians today, do we need courage?
It's sort of like faith, courage, everything's gonna be okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It takes courage to live godly in this present world, does it not?
I think courage enables you to do things you don't think you're capable of doing.
I think that's a great point, Sister Dusty. It enables us to do things we don't think we're capable of doing. God, we might say we can't, but what does God tell us?
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
There you go, Sister Dusty. All things are possible, and Sister Nana, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. It comes down to having that positive, optimistic attitude, does it not? And that's the attitude that we can have that comes from our faith, does it not? It trusts in the promises of God, such as the promise, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. In the promise, if God be for us, well, who can be against us? Can anyone be against us with God on our side?
They may be against us, and they won't be successful.
There you go, Brother Carl. They may be against us, but they're not going to be successful. Because our faith in God provides us with the victory. Remember 1 John 5 verse 4, and remember the song we often sing, faith is the victory that overcomes the world. We're more than conquerors through Christ Jesus. And so we can live a life of faith. We can possess the courage that is needed to stand in this present world. But then you also notice here that they were told to bring of the fruit of the land, or in other words, samples of what the land possessed. Now, why do you think they were instructed to bring back some of the fruit of the land? Why would they be specifically told to do this?
So others can see.
Others could,
Others could see it.
and know that it would be a bountiful land.
It was.
Also strengthen their faith.
That's a good point. They could see it, tangible evidence of the land that they were going to go into, and it would strengthen their faith because God had told them He was going to bring them into a land that floweth with milk and honey. You know, and again, not literal milk or honey, but that's a description of just how bountiful the land would be that God had promised them. And so this is their basic commission. Now you look at verses 21 through 23, and we won't take the time to read these passages because I want to read the ones later on down here, but you look at their direction. And they did exactly as Moses directed them to do. They traversed the entire area from the region of Zin on the southern border to Rehob, which was to the north, and back again. And they covered the entire territory. And again, God intended for this spying out of the land to be thorough, so that Israel would know what they were going into. So God didn't want Israel to go into there, I guess, with their spiritual eyes closed. He wanted them to know the kind of land they were entering, did He not? And as Brother Ricky pointed out, this was designed to build their faith. This was designed to build them up and to encourage them. Now, does it work? Well, we'll find out here in just a moment. What did they see according to verses 23 and 24? What did they do when they came to the brook of Eshcol? Here in verse 23, what did they cut down? Cluster of grapes and they bear it between two upon a staff. Now what does this signify? You think about a cluster, maybe you think about it as something you can put in the palm of your hand. Not this, obviously.
So you got to have 2 men to carry.
That tells us about the quantity, does it not, of the land. And then they put it upon this on a staff and bear it between two. And they also brought of the pomegranates and the figs. Now, what does all of this? Why does God put this in here? What does this tell us about Canaan?
He's ready for them to take it. They wouldn't have to work for it. They just have faith to go in.
There you go, Sister Dusty. It's rich. It's bountiful. All you got to do is enter in by faith. Just, take it by faith. Because again, God said, I'm going to give it to you. And again, when God promises something, what should be our response to the promises of God? What should Israel's response have been to the promise of God here regarding the land? Take it. Let's go in. But again, we're going to see their response is going to be quite different than what God expected. And so, verse 25, we're told they returned from searching of the land after 40 days. Now, is this number 40 days significant? Oh, yeah. Oh, it's going to be very significant later on, especially in our study next week. But you think about 40 days as well. Christ was, and again, maybe, yeah, let's do a little rabbit hole jumping now. Christ fasted in the wilderness 40 days, 40 nights. How long did the flood last? 40 days, 40 nights. Just, a random thought there that came to my mind when they came to that.
I have trouble with this man in this book sometimes. But he said they traveled approximately 300 miles. So that would be a 600-mile round trip. I don't see how in 40 days you could walk.
Yeah, 15 miles a day or something.
But can you get 600 miles in?
Yeah, it'd be 15 miles a day.
15 miles a day times 10 days is 150 miles. And then you add another 10 days to that. That's 300 miles in 20 days. Then you double that, 600 miles in 40 days. So if that is correct, it is possible according to that calculation.
That
Had to hoof it.
That's the only way they could travel.
Mm-hmm.
That
They were
family.
used to it, they probably.
Yeah, it wasn't that big deal.
Yeah.
You go 5 miles in 2 hours easy.
Mm-hmm. Of course, marathon runners do that in, a lot less time than it takes us to walk in.
But this is in the wilderness now, you got to think about it.
Yeah.
And they were like hiding, I thought, they weren't just walking down the main road in the rain.
Right. But needless to say, they accomplished the task. I think that's the most important thing, is they accomplished the task. All right, let's look at what they reported, verses 26 through 30. And if someone would, let's read these verses now. Now here's where the rubber's going to hit the road. Let's read verses 26 through 30. Who has it for us?
And they went and came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the children of Israel unto the wilderness of the land to Kish, and brought back word unto them and unto all the congregation, and showed him the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, We came unto the land where their sins was, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. Nevertheless, the people which from that dwell in the land, the cities are all walls and very great, and moreover we saw the children there. What did you say? Oh, and the Amalek, I have trouble with these names, dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites, and the Amalekites dwell in the mountains. And the Canaanites dwell on the sea and by the coast of Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people from Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it.
Thank you, Sister Nana. All right. As they begin their report, first of all, according to verse 26 and 26, they showed unto Moses in the congregation the fruit of the land they had brought. First and foremost, they did that. And then you look at verse 27, they truly recognized, and they tell the truth here, that we came into the land where you sent us. Now, whither thou sentest. Does this phrase, does this sort of indicate their attitude here? It isn't the land that we wanted to go to, it's the land where you sent us. Do you think this has anything to do with their attitude?
Has a whole lot to do with attitude, I think.
I think so too. That they really didn't want to go. That they really didn't want to be there.
And these are the 12 spots. The 12
I would suggest here it's 10 of them.
It's just two, 10.
Well, there's 12 spies, but I would suggest that this part of the report is not coming from 2 of the spies. And we know who those 2 are. But they attest that it surely flows with milk and honey. And I say that about this phrase, the land whither thou sentest, because according to verse number 2 of chapter 13, they should have said, the land the Lord sware to gave us. Here's what we found in the land the Lord sware to gave us. But instead, it's the land you sent us to. Two different dispositions, I would suggest. Now, what did they attest? Now, their true colors is going to be evident soon enough. But what do they say in verses 28 and 29? For the positive things they had to say, what now? They changed their tune now. What do they say here?
People dwelling in the land are strong. They're great stature, sons of giants.
Yeah. And again, they're telling the truth. They are giving an accurate description, but as you pointed out, Brother Keith, they're taking a faithless approach, are they not? They're not taking the approach that, hey, God brought us through the wilderness. He delivered us from the Egyptians. Look at the events that happened at the Red Sea. We can go up into the land no matter how big they are, and we can overcome.
And these people were protected by the walls. I think that they were out in the open, the desert, and walls
Yeah. They were looking by, and again, Sister Nana, here's the problem. They were looking by sight rather than by faith. Oh, they had the walls, but they didn't have God on their side.
And the fear that they should.
And here's where this fear is coming in. This is a fear. This fear is produced through faithlessness. Would we be correct in saying that? It's a fear that produces unbelief.
They're still doubting God.
They're still, again, and that's another attitude that ties in, Brother Ricky. It's doubt. They doubt God. Do you think they're thinking that they have to do all of this on their own?
Yeah.
And I think he points out in the book that they're thinking they have to do all of this on their own. They don't. You know, again, Romans 8:31, if God be for us, who can be against us? And they had God. God had promised them. God had guided them, was guiding them through the wilderness. Pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. So God was with them. But again, the problem of walking by sight rather than by faith.
I bet if we were there and we could ask a lot of these Israelites, well, do you believe in God? Oh, yes, I believe in God.
Yeah.
But their actions show that they truly don't have
Yeah.
that faith in God.
Exactly. Otherwise, they take him at his word and follow his word. And that's what faith does. It does it not? It takes God at his word, accepts his word, and acts on that word.
It acts on it. That's the important thing, I think.
It acts on. I mean, look at Noah as an example. God told him to build an ark. How many of us would have laughed and said, "God, you got to be crazy. You want me to build that big of an ark?" But what did Noah do? He took God at his word and he acted on his word. Saved himself and his household, even when others may have ridiculed it. And that's what faith does. Now look at the faith of Caleb in verse 30. What does he do? When the people began murmuring, and again, that's evidently what started, according to what Caleb does here. Evidently the spies stirred reaction in the people. So what does Caleb do first of all?
Calms the people.
He calms the people. Then what does he do? What does he say?
We can go up and take possession.
Encouraging. It's encouragement. And again, here's faith for you. Here's a great example of faith. You know, he tells the people, he stills them, and he tells them, let's go up at once and possess it. And for we are able to overcome. Now, what did Caleb recognize that the rest of Israel could not?
That God was with them.
God was with him. Exactly right, Brother Keith. You know, he astutely and correctly recognized it. Caleb and Joshua, and for that matter Moses, had they forgotten all that God had done for Israel? Nope. They hadn't forgotten what God had promised, unlike the 10 spies. And so we see here what it means to walk by faith. Was it a challenge? Absolutely. You're going into a land you've never dwelled in. You're going to come face to face with inhabitants that you've never encountered before. It's a challenge. But again, we face challenges in our everyday life. But we overcome by faith. Faith in God, faith in his promises. And Caleb's showing us here what it means to walk by faith. Now, let's look at verses 31 through 33, what they feared. And here we come to the negative report. And if someone would, let's begin by reading verses 31 and 32. Let's set the stage for verse 33. Someone would read verses 31 and 32.
But the men that said, would be not able to go up against these people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up a faithful report to the land which they had searched, and unto the children of Israel. The land through which they have gone, searched it, is the land that gave up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw are not men of great stature.
All right, thank you, Brother Carl. All right, two things we see here. Here, Sister Nana, is that negative fear we're talking about, what we're trying to notice. We see their fearful disposition, verse 31. Again, what's the first words out of their mouth in contrast to what Caleb said? And again, the word but draws the contrast. Caleb says, we can. What are these 10 spies saying? We can't. Caleb said, again, faith says we can. Faithlessness and doubt and fear says we can't. And as readily as Caleb challenged and encouraged the people, these 10, they really threw water on the fire, did they not? Where Caleb said we are able to overcome, they said we are unable to overcome. Again, this is a demonstration of their faithlessness. And they emphasize their faithlessness because they refer to the people as being stronger than we. Now, they had God on their side. Now, who's stronger, man or God? The answer is easy. And yet, what is Israel saying now? We can't do it. People are stronger than we are.
They think we're grasshoppers.
Yep. And this is the problem. At every turn, Israel was leaving who out of the picture? They're leaving God out of the picture. And that's what faithlessness does. It has no room for God. And Israel here is guilty of this. They had everything going for them, did they not? But yet they chose to focus fearfully on the outward feasibility in the face of worldly power rather than upon their inward faith in the omnipotence of God. They lost perspective because they had forgotten all God had done for them prior to this event. And it's so easy for us in the hustle and bustle of everyday life to lose our perspective, is it not?
What goes on in the world today, we need this lesson. We need this lesson.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have faith, they ain't gonna indeed kind of accomplish the goal we want to achieve.
Yeah. You need faith in every endeavor in life, do you not?
Well, our trials and tribulations are supposed to make us stronger.
Yeah.
That's what we have.
Indeed. Draws us closer to God.
But we must endure.
We endure. We don't understand every single thing that goes on, but we can endure. I mean, look at Job of old.
Have I doubted God? Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Guilty.
I think we all are guilty of that from time to time. I mean, but
Those dead wine things happen,
yeah, but we cannot allow these things to overcome us, like Israel did. Job didn't, so we can follow his example. And so verse 32 gives us their evil report. And the idea here is that their accusations about the land were untrue. And again, we've noted they gave reasons as to why they believed they could not conquer the land. Number one, they believed that the people were stronger than we. And again, remember how many footmen alone was in Israel. We talked about this last week. Yeah, it's exactly right, Sister Dusty. 600,000. So they had numbers, and they had God on their side leading them. So this argument's false. But then they said the land devours its inhabitants. Well, as we've noted, this is double speak. They are now accusing the land of being harsh and cruel when they had acknowledged it as flowing with milk and honey. So they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. And of course, we saw that their statement, all the people that we saw in it were of great stature. We saw the giants, the sons of Anak. But again, as we've observed, with God on their side, they were more than conquerors. They could defeat anyone, even those giants. Because with God. If God be for us, who can be against us, as we continue to stress? And the answer is no one. Let's read now verse 33, and let's see the ultimate manifestation of their faithlessness.
There were some giants who sinned, so when they came from giants, and we were like the grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight.
Thank you, Brother Larry. Oh, here's the grasshopper mentality. You see, here's where a lack of faith gets you. Who did they trust in? Themselves, rather than in God. And again, this verse speaks to us of the fact they thought they had to do it all themselves, do they not? Is this not what they're saying? In essence, we can't do it because if we got to do it ourselves, we're not going to be able to succeed. But again, they couldn't see they didn't have to do it themselves. They had God. Why couldn't they not see that God was going to bring them into the land? Why could they not accept that fact? Let's ask this question now.
Lack of faith.
Again, lack of faith. Doubt. And all of this in turn led to them walking by sight.
They've seen in the past, previously, that great things God has done also.
And again, this is what makes this all the more amazing and tragic, is it not, Brother Carl? They had witnessed the mighty deeds of God. They had seen the plagues brought down on Egypt. They had seen God deliver them at the Red Sea. They had seen the Egyptians drown in the waters that were brought back down. They had seen the manna come down from heaven. And yet again, they forget God. Faithlessness.
They were fearing the people and not fearing God.
Yeah. They feared the power of the people rather than fearing and reverencing the power of God. And
Still in charge.
He is still in charge.
And that's what gets me through the news.
And so that leads into chapter 14, verses 1 through 4. What did Israel desire? A return to Egypt. Someone would read verses 1 through 3, and then we'll read verse 4. Let's go ahead and read these 3 verses.
And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, for would God we had died in this wilderness. And wherefore hath the Lord brought us into this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be afraid? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt?
All right, thank you, Sister Dusty. Again, unbelief. First of all, you look in verse number 1, we see their despair. And they were united in their lamentation, in their weeping. Again, as we've noted, instead of believing the encouraging message of Caleb and trusting God, they believed what message? Of the 10 spies. They were discouraged. And they were lifted up with terror. And so, verses 2 and 3, in the midst of their crying out, they turn once again on Moses and Aaron. And they chide them, and really they chide God for bringing them out into the wilderness to die. In essence, they are accusing God of planning to kill them. Can you imagine this? Accusing God of just wishing the worst upon them, planning the worst for them. But yet this is what they do. And they accuse Moses of following along with this plan. They found it preferable if they had remained in Egypt. And so, look at verse 3. They declare, they ask the question, were it not better for us to return into Egypt? So look at verse 4 now. What do they want to do? What's their plan? Instead of going into the promised land, they want to go where? Oh, back to Egypt. We got to get back to Egypt. Now, why would they want to go back to Egypt? Had they forgotten? And we've talked about this a couple of Sunday nights ago.
They had no faith.
They had no faith. They had more faith in themselves than they did in God.
And they forgot how the Pharaoh treated them. They couldn't remember how bad it was.
That's exactly right, Sister Nana. They had forgotten their experience in Egypt.
As men, we like to handle things ourselves.
We do.
But without God, we can't do it.
Well, it's like we sing the song, without Him I could do nothing. Without Him I'd surely die. We'd fail, And again, this is where faith comes in. But I think it's important to note, when your eyes are on yourself and your circumstances, you lose your perspective, do we not?
See, verse 3 says, die. You know, our wives and children will be left with ten
It was
people.
10 against
That's
2.
a very human feeling.
It's a very human feeling.
You know, but I look at verse 1, a prophet cried out to God instead of the people, you know, for God to deliver the blessing instead of crying.
I think that's the key verse. Instead of crying out to God, they cried out unto themselves. And that really shows us how they were operating. Yeah, it's a human feelings.
I know in life, Robert, you know, I used to pray about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But now I don't do anything without praying about it.
There you go.
I mean, I think I've grown that much.
That's the right disposition, Ricky. You know, pray. We got to pray. You know.
You will have access.
Oh, yeah, that's a trial of tribulation.
Yeah, you're gonna have, I mean, you still got, looking,
They were trusting
Just
the
us.
majority of those spies, 10 against 2. I guess that might have influenced them a little bit, like, hey, yeah, they can't do it.
And they wanted to know later that it's make us another account.
Yeah, they were not. And again, that shows us they were not happy with God's chosen leadership. Moses Moses as his spokesperson. They were unhappy, discontented with God's plan and his way. But next week, we're going to see the consequences of this as we're going to continue on in chapter 14. But as we have seen in this study this morning, we've looked at the tragedy of unbelief. And Sister Nana, do you better understand what we're talking about with this negative fear now?
Give fear. All things are possible.
Yeah.
That's the way with fear.
It's the fear that does not allow one to trust God. And I hope we've done a pretty good job of discussing that this morning. But I hope this lesson encourages us as Christians at all time to be walking by faith rather than by sight.